نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعون أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء لجعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद। औरों ने शहे करबला को जिंदगी का भरोसा नहीं है। औरों ने शहे करबला को जिंदगी का भरोसा नहीं है। जो भी गिरता है इस गम में आंसू, कोई बेकार जाता नहीं है। औरों ने शहे करबला को जिंदगी का भरोसा नहीं है। जब जले होंगे ख़ैमे हरों के, जब छीनी होंगी सर से रदाएं, जब जले होंगे ख़ैमे हरों के, जब छीनी होंगी सर से रदाएं, क्या बनी होंगी सैदानियों पर, क्या बनी होंगी सैदानियों पर। वो समाज से जाता नहीं है। औरों ने शहे करबला को जिंदगी का भरोसा नहीं है। बहर ताज़ीम उठो ऐ अकबर, पर्दादारी करो मेरे दिलबर। बहर ताज़ीम उठो ऐ अकबर, पर्दादारी करो मेरे दिलबर। आ रही है सवारी फूफी की, जिसका कोई सहारा नहीं है। औरों ने शहे करबला को जिंदगी का भरोसा नहीं है। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद।
Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 226. Chapter number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 26. No, 26. Sorry, 26. Majlis would be very different. Topic would be very different otherwise. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 26. For the love of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of the awaited Savior, Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-sharif, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله لا يستحيي أن يضرب مثلا ما بعوضة فما فوقها فأما الذين آمنوا فيعلمون أنه الحق من ربهم وأما الذين كفروا فيقولون ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا يضل به كثيرا ويهدي به كثيرا وما يضل به إلا الفاسقين. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله al-Hussain صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. The camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is very wide. If you take a step back and look at the personalities that are in there, people are very, very different in their backgrounds, in their ages, even in their religions. They are very, very different. Those who were in the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Take a roll call. You know all of these incredible individuals and their personalities and their backgrounds, but just think about them side by side by side. You had, for example, John, the freed slave of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, who was said to be black individual. And the reason why, of course, they emphasize this point is to show that it doesn't matter about color or skin color or tone as to whether you could have been in the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. So John was present in the camp. You had, for example, Wahab in the camp. Wahab was a Christian, and you know his story, that when Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is going towards Kufa, they find a sort of a tent, and Imam asks, "Are you okay?" Lady says that we've run out of water, which at that time was the equivalent of running out of petrol. Your horse cannot move anywhere without water, so they're stuck where they are. She says, "We've run out of water." According to the narration, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam strikes his staff, water miraculously comes, and they say, "Who are you?" And they want to join the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Wahab is a Christian. There is his mother, and then there's Wahab's wife, and apparently Wahab and his wife are newlyweds. Wahab is martyred, his mother is martyred, And so you didn't even necessarily need to be Muslim or from the Shia faith to be in the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. This is how wide the tent is. So John, Wahab, you have, for example, Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. She is a 60-year-old woman, approximately. So an elderly woman. Yet at the same time, you have a 6-month-old baby in Abdullah al-Radi'. So from 60 years old to 6 months old, you can be in the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Or, for example, you could be Qasim, who maybe was 15 years old approximately, son of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. Or Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, who was approximately 13 years old. Or you can be Ruqayya or Sukaina, who maybe have been younger, all the way up to possibly even 4 years old. You can also be the son of an Imam. You can be Ali Akbar, for example. You can be an Imam yourself, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, and you can still be in the tent. It's very interesting. Someone asked this question to me a few days ago. They said, when we say this line in Ziyarah, which we spoke about a few nights ago, that may, I be sacrificed for you, and these sorts of lines that are mentioned within the ziyarat, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum. These lines are from a ziyarah which comes from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. This is a ma'soom saying, I wish I was with you, not just Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, non-ma'soomeen. Right? It's in the plural, isn't it? Ya laytani kuntu ma'akum. I wish I had been with you collectively. A ma'soom is saying, I wish I had been with non-ma'soomeen. Why? Because it wasn't about whether you were ma'soom or not. It was the stance that was being taken. That a ma'soom says, I wish I had been with non-ma'soomeen in their endeavor. Can you see how wide the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is? It is so broad, it is so inclusive of anyone who is on that path. So of course, when we say wide, we don't mean physically wide. It's a metaphor that anyone can potentially be within the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Your age doesn't matter. Your gender doesn't matter. Whether you are Arab or non-Arab doesn't matter. Whether you are practicing or not practicing at that moment doesn't matter. Regular to the mosque, not regular, doesn't matter. These are not qualities that Allah is judging you on. He's judging you in that moment. Will you submit to truth or not? This is the ultimate judgment of being in the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. And of course, one of the reasons for that is that no matter our background, we can see ourselves in that camp. We don't imagine that this is an exclusive camp for the family of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam alone, or Arabs alone, or something like that. No matter whom we are, our skin color, our background, our ethnicity, our nationalism, the surname that we have, rich, poor, famous, not, none of us feel excluded from the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. All of us see ourselves in that camp in some way, shape, or form. This is why the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is so wide. There are other reasons as well. And I want to be able to go through those tonight. Number one, I want to mention in the Quran, Allah gives these examples of something so small or so innocent or so ordinary, yet Allah uses it as the example for you and I, number one. And number two, to ask this question, why is the camp so wide? As we said, one of the reasons is that we can see ourselves in that camp. There are also one or two other reasons why the camp is so wide and we have so many examples of different martyrs and different occasions. What I want to do is I want to read to you from the maqtal itself. And I want to read to you from the story of the departure of Medina, and particularly from the maqtal of Abdullah al-Radi', the 6-month-old baby, or the baby of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Why do we want to do this? We want to do this because I want you to see in the maqtal how nuanced or how particular some of the statements are from Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, or some of the subtleties or the finer points of the martyrdom of these companions. So that when we see them, we understand the depth of the tragedy. We can see why Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam needed all of these different examples within his camp. Had it just been about him, he himself could have gone. But he needed all of these different examples to demonstrate something. He needed a John. He needed a Wahab to be present. He needed an Ali Asghar to be present. He needed a Ruqayya, a Zainab, an Abbas, an Akbar to be present. And as long as all of them are present, we can see the fullness of a certain picture. What is that picture in its entirety? We want to be able to discuss that tonight, inshallah, by looking at the examples in the Quran and looking at examples of the Maqtal, which we will read, inshallah, to understand just how wide the tent of Imam al-Hussain is, with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is very wide. None of us feel excluded from it. We all see ourselves in the mirror of that tent. We feel like we can be present. Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 26. It's an ayah at the beginning of the Quran. Many of you would have read this over and over. You know this verse very, very well. I just want you to note what Allah is telling us here. Why does Allah give us the example of John and Wahab and Asghar and Abbas and Zainab, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, in this movement of Karbala? Have a read of this ayah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah la yastahyi an yadriba mathalan ma ba'udatan fama fawqaha. Allah is not ashamed. He does not disdain. He does not hold back from setting forth an example of even that of a mosquito. Allah wants you to, A, know the animal. I mean, everybody knows a mosquito, right? I mean, whether you're living in Arabia or in Africa, everyone knows of these animals, right? These creatures of Allah, because you can't, everyone gets attacked by them, right? But at the same time, He doesn't want to use an animal that everyone knows. He's giving you a small creature, not that something so small that you can't see it. There are types of creatures that you cannot see. Allah could have said, I give you the example of an amoeba, a single-celled organism, but no one would have understood it at that time. So He uses an animal that's the smallest possible animal that everybody knows. Inna Allah la yastahyi an yadrib mathalan ma ba'udatan. Allah is not ashamed to give you even an example of even the smallest of creatures, and mosquito, fama fawqaha, or even a thing that's bigger than that, greater than that in size. Can you see? In the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, the youngest is a baby. In the example of Allah, He's saying to you, look, the same thing. I will show you even the smallest of example. Don't lose the message out of this. Sort of, don't lose the forest for the trees. You've heard this saying, right? Yeah, when you get to the forest, people look at the tree, just the outside. They don't see anything deeper than that. They don't go into the forest and say, oh, we've reached the edge. That's the end of it. No. Allah is saying, I'm not ashamed to even give you the smallest of example. It's not ordinary. Because when I give you these examples in the Quran, or when I give you these examples through the examples of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, don't take them as tiny. This is not about a 6-month-old. This is about a 6-month-old. This is a 6-month-old that went to a battlefield, that gave itself willingly to defend his father. It shows you how much can be sacrificed in the way of truth. It's not just a 6-month-old. It's a 6-month-old. Understand what is being talked about here. إن الله لا يستحي أن يضرب مثلا ما بعوضة فما فوقها. Now look at this next part of the ayah. فأما الذين آمنوا. those who believe. فَيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. They know it. They understand these examples. They realize these examples, even if they're tiny. Allah might talk to you about the she-camel, a camel in the Quran. He might talk to you about an elephant. He might take an oath by a star. Whatever it is. The believers, they understand these things. These are truths from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not ordinary. It's not things to be mocked at or overlooked or just passed by. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فَيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. But as for those who disbelieve, فَيَقُولُونَ مَاذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِهَذَا مَثَلًا. What does Allah want us to take away from this example? They don't get it. You can even show to them these examples that God is going to give you. I'll take an oath to you by the sun. What is he talking about? I'll tell you that the Prophet went to the heavens on Mi'raj. Nonsense. I'll tell you about a camel in the Quran. Why is he giving these other? These are stories of the ancients. قَالُوا أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. They used to say in the Quran. These are just stories of the old folk. What's it got to do with our life today? Can you see? Those people who disbelieve, they take a completely different angle and attitude to the same stories, to the same example. It doesn't impact them one iota. It's like water off a duck's back. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَيَقُولُونَ مَاذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِهَذَا مَثَلًا يُذِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا. By these stories, many are sent astray. By these examples, many are sent astray. وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. By these examples, even as small as a mosquito, many are guided by it. They actually understand what's being told to them. وَمَا يُذِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. And he does not cause to err by it except those who are the fasiqeen, the mischief makers. That's the quality that stops them from understanding the reality of these things. You see, in the Quran, in the examples of Karbala, it can be the smallest example Allah wishes to be able to demonstrate. Open your Qurans to chapter number 19. Surah Maryam. Verse number 28 onwards. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This story is of Maryam alayhi salam. You know that she's just given birth to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And people see her and they say, you've been unchaste. You weren't married. You didn't have a partner. Why are you now giving birth to a child? You've clearly done something haram. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ukhta Harun, O sister of Harun, ma kana abuki imra'a saw'in wa ma kanat ummuki baghiya. Your father was not an evil man and your mother was not an unchaste woman. Why do we see you with a child and you don't have a husband? فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. Verse 29. She pointed to this newborn, a few hours old baby, Isa alayhi salam. فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. قَالُوا كَيْفَ نُكَلِّمُ مَنْ كَانَ فِي الْمَهْدِ صَبِيًّا. How can an infant, newborn baby, speak to us from the cradle? Think about this. Allah is showing you in the Quran, a baby can defend the truth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You understand? 6-month-old, a newborn of a few hours can stand for haqq against batil. For a person who disbelieves, this is not rational. It's not possible. There's no such thing as God, soul, angels, miracles. These are just events. We are molecules flying through the space, and eventually we will die, and that is the end of our existence. That's it. For those who believe, it does something different to them. They understand these examples of truth, that Allah can set the precedent in the Quran. Even a baby of a few hours or days old can stand for the woman of her time. Said Maryam alayhi salam. Is it a surprise to you if you hear Ali Asghar, was willing to give his life for Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam? Can you see? Allah sets the precedent in the Quran, and you can see how this manifests itself on the 10th of Muharram. The idea is, number one, you can see all of us within this tent. Because all these examples are of different people. Someone who was not Muslim, someone who was black, someone who was a slave, someone who's an elder, someone who's a child, someone who's an infant. Everyone sees themselves in the movement of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Okay, so this is how the Quran demonstrates these issues. Allah shows you the example of the mosquito. He shows you the example of the infant. What I want to do is just read to you some things from the Maqtal. And the purpose behind this is to then answer this question of why Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam has so many different people in his camp. As I said, number one, there is the first reason that we see ourselves, which we'll come back to in the end. Second reason, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, through these examples, is able to show us the level of depravity and the level of hardship and suffering that he had to undergo. In terms of the depravity around him, when we talk about Banu Umayyah, people cannot understand or would never have been able to understand the level of depravity of Banu Umayyah, the level of hatred that Banu Umayyah had in their heart for Banu Hashim, for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, had we not had these examples within the Maqtal. When Umar ibn Sa'ad, la'natullahi alayhi, says something like, silence the example of Hussein, and orders Hurmala to shoot an arrow into a newborn's neck, unless this had been mentioned in the Maqtal time and time and time again, we probably wouldn't have been able to imagine the depravity of these people. True? So, one side, we have this important understanding. We understand the level of difficulty that Imam Ma'soom had to undergo. We understand the level of depravity that is in the hearts of Banu Umayyah. This is reason number two. Reason number three, we then identify the Banu Umayyahs of our time by seeing those people who act in the same way as Banu Umayyah of that time. I'm going to demonstrate these things to you now in the discussion. Okay? Why is that important? Because, again, just like many people were blind to the atrocities of Banu Umayyah then, there are many people who are blind to the atrocities of modern day Yazids today. They hear it, they see it on the news. What does the Quran say? فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Those who don't believe, they just see these same examples. Say, what does Allah mean by these examples? They can't understand it. They don't see it. Whereas when you have acclimatized yourself, you understand the killings that occurred in Karbala, when it happens in another part of the world, you will stand up and say, I won't let that happen again. I won't let Asghar of today die. Which we're going to come to in the end of the discussion, inshallah. Okay? So, I don't know, what time do we have to finish, inshallah? Then I know how much to. Okay. So, I'm going to skip over the maqtal of the departure of Karbala, departure from Medina to Karbala, and I'm just going to go to the maqtal of Abdullah al-Radhi'. And I just want you to read or listen to these different maqatil. As you know, the stories are slightly different in different maqtals. It's not new to you. But I want you to understand, look at the depravity of Banu Umayyah. Look at how much Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam went through. Had you not heard this story or read this story or known that this is recorded in history books, you could never have imagined that people were like this to the family of the Prophet. Salamullahi alayhim ajma'in. So, as you know, I often read to you from this wonderful book. I always encourage you to read it or to purchase it and have it. It's called The Chronicles of Martyrdom of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, and it is arguably the best work in English, looking at the martyrdom story of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam from beginning to end. So I'm going to read to you different lines. I want you to imagine what Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam went through, and I want you to know the depravity of these people. Without all these examples, without having an Asghar present, without having a Zainab present, without having Akbar present, we would not have known the extent of these matters. I'm reading to you just parts. Imam alayhi salam said to Zainab alayhi salam, take him, Azghar. This is after the killing. Take him. Then he gathered the baby's blood in his palms until they were full, threw the blood towards the heavens and said, whatever happens to me is easier to bear because Allah is witnessing it. I can bear this. Or it is easier for me to bear it, the shooting of the arrow into my baby, because Allah is witnessing this. This is the only thing that can give me solace. He is present recording it. Why? Because you know that He will then take account of it. He will take revenge for it. Imagine a human being saying that. It's one thing to lose a child, God forbid. But then to respond in this godly way. You've never seen God consciousness like this in the history of humanity. This is easier for me to bear because Allah is witnessing it. Now look at this next line. You've all heard this, but just think about it in the context of why this is so important in the maqtal. قال الباقر عليه السلام. Imam al-Baqir عليه السلام says, فَلَمْ يَسْقُطْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الدَّمْ قَطَرٌ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. Not a single drop that Imam al-Hussain threw to the skies of that blood of Azghar fell back to the ground. That's a miracle. Allah is saying, I've accepted this in such a way. Only with Asghar's presence could we know that this event took place. Could we realize that this is the extent of what occurred on that day, on the 10th of Muharram. Next part of the hadith, or the different maqtal. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam turned towards one of his children, an infant who was crying due to thirst. He took him in his arms and said, "O people, if you bear me no mercy, then at least have mercy to this child." In reply, a man from amongst the Yazidin army shot an arrow towards the child and slaughtered him. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam began to weep and said, "O Allah, judge between us and those who invited us, pledging support to us, but then killed us." What happens next in the maqtal? فَنُودِيَ مِنَ الْهَوَىٰ. A voice came from the sky. دَعْهُ يَا حُسَيْنِ فَإِنَّ لَهُ مُرْضِعًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Do not be concerned about this child, O Hussein, for we give him milk in paradise. We'd never have understood the reality of what's going on between the earth and the heavens with this sacrifice had it not been for Ali Asghar. In another maqtal, in the book Al-Ihtijaj, one of our early books, this is the version of the story of Ali and Akbar. Maybe you've not heard this version. It's not one that's popularly narrated from the pulpits. It's been reported that when the companions and the family members of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam had been martyred, he was left alone with no one by his side except his son Zain al-Abidin and another son Abdullah, who was a nursing baby. Al-Hussain alayhi salam came into the entrance of the tent and he said, "Nawili dhalika at-tifla hatta uwadda'ahu." Give me this infant so I may kiss him farewell. So he wasn't brought out. Imam al-Hussain went to say goodbye to his baby. They brought him the baby. He began to kiss the baby and said, "O my dear son, my dear child, woe unto those people on the day when their accuser will be the Prophet." At that moment, whilst he was bidding farewell to Asghar, the hadith says, this one, it is said at that moment, an arrow was shot and hit the base of the throat of the child, killing him. Al-Hussain came down from his horse, dug a grave for the blood-stained baby with the hilt of his sword and buried him. Look at the depravity of these people. He's saying farewell to his child and they shot him, the baby. I'll take you one maqtal further. This one, it's not popular, but it's mentioned in not Shia sources. This is important. This is mentioned in Sunni historical books. This book is called Tarikh al-Ya'qubi. I don't know if you heard this maqtal. Apparently, according to Sunni history, the baby, Asghar or Abdullah al-Radi' was not 6 months old. Do you know how old he was? He had just been born that day. Have you heard of this? Have you heard this? Think about this. How many years have you been coming to the gham of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam? According to Sunni historians, Yazid's army didn't kill a 6-month-old. They killed a baby that had been just born that day. That's the depravity of these people. I'll read to you from Tarikh al-Ya'qubi. The companions advanced to the battlefield one by one until he was left all alone. No man or child from his family remained by his side. He was sitting on his horse when he was handed his baby son who had just been born. I'll read it to you in the Arabic. فَإِنَّهُ لَوَاقِفٌ عَلَى فَرْسِهِ. He was stationary upon his horse. إِذْ أُتِيَ بِمَوْلُودٍ. When he was brought a mawlud, a newborn baby. وُلِدَ لَهُ فِي تِلْكَ السَّاعَةِ. Born in that hour. On the afternoon of the 10th of Muharram, this baby is born. Al-Hussain recited the adhan in the baby's ear. So this is the first act the father is supposed to do, correct? He hasn't even done this. This is the first act, his first initiation to his newborn baby. He recites the adhan in the baby's ear. He rubs honey on its palate, and an arrow shot at the baby's throat and lodged in his throat, killing him. Al-Hussain took out the arrow from his throat, rubbed the blood on his body, saying, "By Allah, you are more honorable in Allah's eyes than the she-camel of Prophet Saleh. Just as Muhammad is more honorable than Prophet Saleh." And then he proceeded to bury him next to his other children and nephews. The first reason why the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is so wide, so that we can see ourselves in there. Whatever our image, whatever our age, whatever our background, our color, our nationality, you can be black or white, you can be Arab, non-Arab, you can be old or young, you see yourself in that moment. You might be a father. You understand what it's like to hold a baby. You take on Hussein's grief. You might be a 13-year-old daughter. You know what it's like to be ripped from your father. You take on the position of Sukaina bint al-Hussain. Reason number one. Reason number two, we would never have known Imam al-Hussain. We would never have known the depravity of the people against Imam al-Hussain had it not been for these examples in Karbala. Reason number three, we were never supposed to leave Karbala in history. There are some people who see the same events today, but they turn a blind eye to it. They see it every day, it makes no difference to them. Their heart doesn't quiver at all. Whereas actually when you see the events of the world, even until today, you will notice that its description is the same as the description of the 10th and 11th of Muharram, except these aren't our leaders that are being slaughtered. These are ordinary Muslims, ordinary human beings being slaughtered. I'm going to read to you from a newspaper or an online paper. It's called Haaretz. Haaretz. This is a Jewish newspaper which is pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli. Haaretz is pro-Palestinian. It's written by Jewish individuals who take honesty in capturing what happens in Palestine every single day. So this is an article. It's not long. It'll take you about 3 minutes to read the whole article. I'm just quoting to you pieces by it, yeah? Written by Gideon Levy, clearly Jewish name, individual who was writing these words. And I want you to understand how every day the massacres occur, the attack on the tents occur. Quote, try to imagine hundreds of loathsome thugs at the entrance of your home, burning and destroying everything, and yourself hoping they don't enter your house to hurt your children. That's all Sajjad alayhi salam could do. That's all Zainab alayhi salam could do. And being able to do nothing about it until they finally decide to leave. There's no one to call to or turn to help. Subhanallah. Hal min nasirin yansurna. Who will come to the aid of the women folk of the Prophet? Gideon Levy writes, there's no one to call or turn to for help. There are no police, no authorities, no one to call for help. Any step taken in self-defense would be considered an act of terrorism. Obviously, if a Palestinian defends himself, it's an act of terrorism. Try to imagine it. These are his words, try to imagine it. More Palestinians will be killed for no reason and their property will be destroyed. Children will wet their beds, fearing any rustle in the night, knowing that their parents can't do anything to protect them. Again, the Palestinians will be left helpless. The invader is legitimate, and the one defending himself is a terrorist. The moral criteria are incomprehensible in their absurdity. He writes, Gideon Levy for Haaretz newspaper. A person who just overlooks Karbala and is not profoundly struck by a newborn being shot in the neck with an arrow, you can't open up to them. It's like the Quran says. Those people who don't believe, they'll say, what does Allah mean by these things, these examples? What's he trying to tell you by these things? Those people who believe, they know it is the truth from Allah. Allah is showing them an example. Why is the camp of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam so wide? Why did he take this baby? Why did he take his daughters? Why did he take his sisters, elderly sisters? 3 reasons. 1, that we always see ourselves in that camp as well. That could have been us. Number 2, we learn the trial on Imam al-Hussain and the depravity of Banu Umayyah, the like of which we would never have understood before. Number 3, when these events reoccur every day in our lives, we don't ignore them the same way others ignored Karbala. Otherwise, what difference is between us and them? They continue to ignore them today, and if we continue to ignore them today, what is the difference? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi has a hadith where he says, Man asbaha wa lam yahtam bi umur al-muslimin fahuwa laysa bi muslimin. The one who wakes up in the morning unconcerned by the affairs of the Muslims, he is not a proper Muslim. Hadith from the Prophet, from the 6th Imam, who quotes the Prophet in his narration. So tonight, as we recount 10 nights, 10 days after Ashura, whom do you see? Whom do you mirror? If you are ill, you might mirror Sajjad alayhi salam. Whenever Sajjad's maqtal is mentioned, you place yourself in the situation of Sajjad. Hand me a stick and hand me a stool, hand me a sword. Why? I want a stick so I have some strength, so I can lean on something. And I want a sword so I can defend the grandson of Rasulullah. It might be that you identify with Sukaina. She is the first to narrate the story of the night of Sham Ghariban. She says, I was standing outside the camp and I saw the riders beginning to attack. And all I could do was run left and run right in order to escape from them. But they bore down upon me. As I fled, one man from Yazid's army chased me on his horse. He used the flat side of the spear, he hit me on the back so hard that I fell down unconscious. When I woke up in the lap of my auntie Kulthum. I had noticed that my outer garments had been snatched and torn from me. I looked into the eyes of my auntie Kulthum. I said, Auntie, do you have a cloth that you can give me so I can cover myself? Kulthum said, even I don't have a cloth on this night. Even I have had my clothes ransacked from me on this night. It might be that you identify with someone like Ruqayya or Sakina, and you imagine that every time you have to see your younger sister being hit, that you are unable to stop it from happening. You might remember that Sakina and Ruqayya, they had to see their father's head fall from the spear from time to time because of the way in which they treated the head of Imam al-Hussain in such disdain, that when it would fall, that the horse's hooves would continue to kick the head of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. And this 4-year-old and 8-year-old daughter of Imam al-Hussain have to see this occur in front of them. There is no rest for them. All they have to do is continue to suffer this over and over again. That maybe you identify yourself with Sayyida Zainab, and that every time the captives are paraded, there was some people who felt sorry for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. She would say, what are you doing feeling sorry for us now? After all this time, we called you, you wrote to us, now you are crying over what you see. If only you had seen what happened to my brother on the 10th of Muharram. Maybe you identify with Sayyida Kulthum. Maybe you identify with those who had to enter into Bazar al-Sham. Maybe you remember them, and maybe you imagine that moment when Yazid looks towards Imam al-Sajjad and says, I thought Ali ibn al-Hussain was killed on Karbala. They said, no, this is the other son, Ali ibn al-Hussain. He was ill, he survived. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam spoke out, and he was about to be killed. Sayyida Zainab threw herself in front and said, "O Yazid, you will have to kill me before I allow you to kill Sajjad. He is the Imam of our time." على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands, join me in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we're to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, grant us the ziyarah of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam fi dunya wal akhirah. Whatever hajat that we have, Ya Allah, accept them bihaqqi al-Sajjad alayhi salam. We ask you, Ya Allah, help us to understand this grand movement of Karbala and to find ourselves in that movement today, however we can defend the oppressed, however we can defend Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam in our time. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let us stand for ziyarah, inshallah.